Hello, in this video I'm going to talk about the anatomy of the peripheral nervous system. So the nervous system is divided into the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. We talked about the central nervous system in a different video. The central nervous system consists of the brain and the spinal cord. All the other nervous tissue in the body belongs to the peripheral nervous system. And nerves are the main organ of the peripheral nervous system. Other organs of the PNS include ganglia and special sense organs. Before we go on, I want to talk about the difference between a nerve and a neuron, because these are two terms that students often get confused. They're not the same thing. Neurons are cells and nerves are organs. So neurons are the main cells of nervous tissue. We studied neurons before in this class, and neurons have distinct structures such as a cell body, also known as a soma, dendrites, and an axon. Nerves are like the electrical wiring bundles that we find inside of walls and buildings and homes. So your body contains bundles of electrical wiring too, and those are called nerves. The electrical wires inside of a nerve are the axons. So nerves are composed of bundles of axons. So neurons and nerves are related in that a neuron is a cell that has a part called an axon. And inside of a nerve, you will find many, many, many axons. So nerves are bundles of axons. And the function of an axon is to carry information in the form of an action potential. Therefore, nerves, which are made of axons, must also function to carry information in the form of an action potential. Nerves carry information to and from specific regions of the body. Many nerves are mixed, which means they carry both sensory and motor information. Sensory information is information flowing towards the central nervous system, while motor information is information flowing away from the central nervous system. An example of a mixed nerve is spinal nerve C5, which carries information from the spinal cord to the muscles on the back of the arm, such as the triceps brachii and the extensor carpi muscles. This nerve also carries information from the skin on the back of the arm to the spinal cord. Some nerves are sensory only, meaning they only carry information towards the central nervous system, and other nerves are motor only, meaning they only carry information away from the central nervous system, but the majority of nerves are mixed. The term nerve applies to both cranial nerves, spinal nerves, and their branches. Cranial nerves are attached to the cranium, or brain, while spinal nerves are attached to the spinal cord. Looking at the cranial nerves, we have 12 pairs of them, so 24 total, and they have many different names, such as the vagus nerve or optic nerve. We will not discuss the cranial nerves further in this video, but I do want to spend some more time talking about spinal nerves. We have 31 pairs of spinal nerves, so 62 total, and each are named relatively for their nearby vertebra. Each spinal nerve has two roots that attach it to the spinal cord. Dorsal roots are found on the dorsal side or posterior side, while ventral roots are found on the ventral or anterior side. Both the dorsal and ventral roots contain axons, which makes sense because they merge to form a spinal nerve, and a spinal nerve, we know, contains axons. Ventral roots contain motor-only axons, so the information flowing through a ventral root is motor-only in nature, whereas dorsal roots only contain sensory axons, meaning the information flowing through a dorsal root is sensory only. Dorsal roots have a structure that we don't see on a ventral root. It's called a dorsal root ganglion. As we've learned before, a ganglion is a group of neuron cell bodies found in the peripheral nervous system. So because we're not talking about the spinal cord or the brain here, we're talking about a structure outside the CNS, this group of cell bodies will be called a ganglion. And because the group of cell bodies is located along the dorsal root, it's called the dorsal root ganglion. Inside of the dorsal root ganglion, we see the cell bodies of many sensory neurons. Spinal nerves must be mixed. Do you know why? That's because we have a spinal nerve forming where dorsal and ventral roots meet. And a dorsal root is sensory only, and a ventral root is motor only. Therefore, where they converge to form the spinal nerve, it must be mixed. Some nerves have branches, and branches are sometimes called rami. Rami is the Latin word for branches. These branches can sometimes form complex interwoven networks called a nerve plexus. In this picture here, we see some different examples of a nerve plexus. And it looks like a web, and it does look pretty complex. But believe it or not, we have these nerve plexuses very well mapped out. We can predict with high fidelity what the consequences will be if damage occurs to any one branch in a nerve plexus. Our last topic in this video is on autonomic nerves. Some spinal and cranial nerves and their branches carry autonomic information only. This is information that's being carried to involuntary organs, such as your heart or your intestines. These spinal nerve branches extend out to structures called an autonomic ganglia before they extend to the organ in question. Don't forget, a ganglia is a group of neuron cell bodies in the peripheral nervous system. These autonomic ganglia help regulate the muscles involved with involuntary actions, such as normal breathing or heart rate, stomach contractions, or uterine contractions. We have both sympathetic and parasympathetic autonomic ganglia. We've talked about these two subdivisions of the autonomic nervous system before. The sympathetic division is also known as the fight or flight division, and it mostly speeds up involuntary organs, with the exception of digestive organs. The parasympathetic division is like a parachute, and it slows down most of your involuntary organs, again, except for digestive organs. These two different subdivisions have different structural autonomic ganglia. So looking first at the sympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system uses a type of autonomic ganglia called sympathetic chain ganglia, which are also known as the sympathetic trunk. This is basically a row of ganglia dangling down along the sides of the vertebral column at the thoracic level. And you can see an artist example of this in the picture on the right-hand side of the screen. Notice we have nerves extending out of the spinal cord at the thoracic and lumbar region, extending to the sympathetic chain ganglia. The parasympathetic nervous system uses a different type of structure. It uses terminal ganglia, and these are ganglia that are embedded in or near the involuntary target organ. So for example, the heart has terminal ganglia embedded inside of it. Notice in the picture here that we can see that the nerves are coming out of the cranium or the sacral region of the spinal cord. So we're going to use cranial nerves or sacral nerves here for the parasympathetic nervous system.